Welcome to Hidden Betrayal Confessions. Let's get started with today's story. My name is Marcus Hill. I'm 45 years old, and I work as a financial analyst. Numbers, patterns, risk assessment, that's my world. I've built my entire career on one principle. If something doesn't add up, there's always a reason why. For most of my life, that logic served me well. Except in my marriage. My wife, Angela Hill, is 37. She works as a night shift nurse at a private hospital. We've been married for 9 years. Not the kind of marriage people post about online. No staged vacation photos, no performative anniversaries. What we had was quieter, structured, reliable. Every morning before I left for work, I'd make coffee. Not because I had to, but because it was part of the rhythm. Angela would usually be getting ready to sleep after her shift, like still in scrubs, tired but calm. Sometimes we'd exchange a few words, sometimes just a look. It was enough. On weekends, we kept things simple. Pizza, maybe a movie we'd both already seen. No pressure to impress each other. No need to prove anything. There's a certain kind of peace in that. A system that works without needing constant adjustment. Some nights, I'd stay up later than I should, just to hear her come home around 7 a.m. The sound of the smart lock clicking open. Her footsteps. The small, familiar noise of keys placed on the counter. That sound meant everything was still, in place. I never questioned her schedule. Night shifts are unpredictable. Emergencies happen. Patients don't follow a calendar. And I trusted her. Completely. Because in my mind, marriage isn't built on passion or even compatibility. It runs on one thing. Trust. Not partial trust, not conditional trust, absolute trust. And for 9 years, I never had a reason to doubt it. Looking back now, that's the part that stands out the most. Not what went wrong, but how stable everything felt. Right before it didn't. The shift didn't happen overnight. If it had, I would have caught it immediately. Instead, it came in fragments. Small deviations from a system I thought I understood. Angela started coming home later. Not dramatically later. Just enough to introduce doubt, not enough to confirm it. A 7 a.m. arrival became 7:30. Then 8. When I asked, the answers were always reasonable. Emergency case. Short-staffed again. You know how it is. And I did. At least, I thought I did. But then the pattern kept repeating. Under her night shifts started extending into what didn't align with any hospital schedule I'd ever seen. Days off disappeared, replaced by last-minute calls. At some point, I stopped tracking what she said and started tracking what didn't match. The first real signal wasn't the time, it was her phone. Angela used to leave it anywhere, kitchen counter, couch, even the bathroom sink. Now, it never left her hand. She started taking it into the bathroom, every time. Screen always facing down, notifications silenced. One night, I noticed something else. Her passcode had changed. I didn't ask immediately. I waited. When I finally did, she didn't hesitate. You're being paranoid. Not defensive, not surprised, just dismissive. That was new. The tone wasn't loud. It wasn't aggressive. But it was precise. Like she had already decided what role I was playing in this conversation. The irrational one. The one imagining things. Gaslighting doesn't look like chaos. It looks like calm certainty that makes you question your own logic. And for a while, it worked. But then came the smaller details. Things harder to explain away. A scent that didn't belong to her. Not hospital-grade sanitizer. Not anything she had ever worn before. Something warmer, intentional. Then there were the calls. Short, late, almost always around 2 or 3 a.m. I'd hear the vibration, see the light flicker briefly across the ceiling, and then silence. By the time I turned my head, the screen was already dark. One night, I caught a glimpse, a name I didn't recognize, gone before I could process it. She started saying she was too tired for anything physical, which made sense, given her job. Except, I'd wake up in the middle of the night and see the faint glow of her screen, active, scrolling, typing, at 3 a.m., not sleeping, not resting, engaged. That's when the equation stopped balancing, not because of one thing, but because of all of them together. Time discrepancies, behavioral changes, emotional distance. Individually, they were noise. Together, they formed a pattern. And I've spent my entire life understanding patterns. I didn't have proof yet. But I had something more important: clarity. I wasn't angry. That would come later, if at all. What I felt instead was recognition. Something in my life had changed. And whatever it wasn't random. I didn't confront her. Confrontation is inefficient when you don't control the information. Instead, I observed, and then I verified, then I acted. I started with something simple: our car. A few years ago, I had installed a dash cam. At the time, it was just for insurance purposes. Something practical, something forgettable. But dash cams don't just record collisions. They record routes, timestamps, stops, patterns. I accessed the data quietly. Late at night, when Angela was in the shower, her phone, as always, within arm's reach. The first few logs didn't mean much. Work, home, normal routes. Then I saw it. A recurring talk of same location, different nights, a place that wasn't the hospital. I zoomed in on the GPS data. A small hotel, not high-end, not run-down either. The kind of place people choose when they don't want attention. I didn't react. Not yet. Data without context is just noise. So I kept collecting. 3 nights later, I followed her. Not closely, not recklessly, at a distance that wouldn't trigger suspicion. She didn't go to the hospital. She went to the same hotel, parked in the same spot, walked in like she had done it before. No hesitation, no looking around. That told me more than anything else. This wasn't new. This was routine. I waited. 47 minutes. Long enough for any doubt to fade. When they came out, I stayed inside the car. I didn't need to be closer. I could see enough. Angela stepped out first, then him. Mid-40s, confident posture, white shirt. But it wasn't the clothes. It was the familiarity. The way his hand rested on her lower back. Not tentative, not exploratory, established. He wasn't guessing. He knew exactly where he was allowed to touch. A doctor, and I didn't need confirmation. But I got it anyway. The next step was digital. We had a shared tablet at home, mostly unused, synced to a cloud account we set up years ago. People forget what they've connected. Systems don't. A notification popped up 2 days later. Cloud sync complete. I opened it. Messages, explicit, direct, unambiguous. No codes, no disguises. Dates that match the dashcam logs. Hotel reservations, room numbers, even jokes about how easy night shifts make everything. That was the moment. Not when I saw them, not when I suspected, but when everything aligned. That's when it became real. I didn't feel rage. I didn't feel the urge to break something. I just sat there and let the information settle into place. Then I made a decision. I contacted a lawyer, David Rosen. Efficient, discreet, expensive, worth it. We built the plan in stages. Financial separation first, accounts restructured, assets documented, everything backed up, every message, every timestamp, every location log. No gaps, no assumptions, just evidence. Angela thought she was managing two lives. What she didn't realize was that both of them had already been mapped out. By me. I didn't rush the ending. If there's one thing I've learned from both finance and life, it's this. Timing determines outcome. Angela thought she was in control, so I let her believe it. 2 weeks after I confirmed everything, she brought up the idea. Our anniversary's coming up, she said casually. 9 years. We should do something. I looked at her for a moment. Same tone, same expression, like nothing had changed. Sure, I said, but let's do it. She took over from there, booked a small venue, invited friends, even included a few of her colleagues from the hospital, including him. That told me everything I needed to know about her level of confidence, or her level of carelessness. The night of the event, everything was polished, soft lighting, music low enough to allow conversation, people laughing, drinking, moving around like this was just another celebration. Angela looked comfortable, not nervous, not distracted. Comfortable. That was the part I noted. Because people who feel safe don't check their surroundings. I arrived early, set everything up on my end, phone fully charged, files organized, backup copies ready, no improvisation. When the room filled up, I stayed consistent. Greeted people, shook hands, made small talk. From the outside, nothing was off. Around 8:40 p.m., Angela tapped her glass. She stood up, smiling. Thank you all for coming, she said. 9 years isn't always easy, but I didn't let her finish. Not out of emotion, out of precision. I stood up slowly, picked up my glass. Actually, I said, calm, measured, I think this is a good moment to be accurate. The room shifted. Subtle, but noticeable. Angela looked at me. Slight confusion. I continued. For 9 years, I believed this marriage was built on trust. No reaction yet. Turns out, it was built on assumptions. Now people were paying attention. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone. No hesitation, no second thoughts. I connected it to the screen behind us. The first image appeared. A timestamp, a location, the hotel. Silence. Then the next. Messages, clear, explicit, names visible, no room for interpretation. Someone in the room exhaled sharply. Angela didn't move, didn't speak. Her face didn't collapse immediately. It held for about 3 seconds. Then it changed. Color drained, eyes widened. She stepped toward me. Marcus, what are you doing? She whispered. I didn't lower my voice. Finishing what you started. Then I turned slightly, looked directly at him. He was already stepping back. Distance, instinctive, predictable. Then I looked back at Angela, straight into her eyes. Em jang ko lua chon kwa mi, gio toi jang tuk hien lua chon kwa toi. I let the words sit there, untranslated, unsoftened, final. No shouting, no insults, just a statement. Around us, the room had gone completely still. No one needed clarification, and the evidence had already done the work. Angela opened her mouth. Nothing came out. For the first time since I had known her. She didn't have a response ready, and that was enough. I picked up my jacket, didn't rush, didn't look back, because there was nothing left to verify. Everything was already clear. The aftermath was predictable, not immediate, but inevitable. Angela didn't call me that night, or the next. When she finally did, I let it go to voicemail. Not out of anger, out of completion. There was nothing left to discuss. By the time she realized the full scope of what had happened, the process was already in motion. Legal filings, financial separation, asset protection, Everything had been executed exactly as planned. David Rosen handled the rest. Efficient, direct, no unnecessary delays. Angela tried to negotiate. Not the divorce, the narrative. She wanted to explain, to clarify, to put things in context. But context doesn't change data, and I deal in facts. The hospital moved faster than I expected. Internal review, ethics violation, termination, not because of the affair alone, but because it involved a doctor within the same system. That kind of liability isn't tolerated. As for him, he disappeared, transferred, quietly. No statement, no defense. People like that don't fight losing positions. They exit. Angela didn't take it well. Not the job, not the reputation, but the silence. Because once the truth is public, people don't confront you. They withdraw. Friends stopped calling. Colleagues stopped responding. Even her own family created distance. Not dramatic, not confrontational. Just absence. That's the part most people don't anticipate, the quiet consequences. As for me, life didn't improve overnight. That's not how systems work. There's always a period of recalibration, but it was stable, predictable again. No inconsistencies, no unexplained variables. The house felt different, not emptier, clearer. I replaced the smart lock a week later, not because I needed to, because I could. Control matters, routine matters, clarity matters. Months passed. Then one afternoon, without planning it, I met someone. Emily Carter. No dramatic introduction, no complicated history, just normal. And that stood out more than anything. She didn't hide her phone, didn't deflect simple questions, didn't create gaps in her own story. There were no patterns to decode. Because everything was already consistent. And that's when I understood something I didn't before. Trust isn't blind. It's built on alignment, on actions that match words, on systems that don't contradict themselves. What I had before was belief. What I have now is verification. I didn't win. That's not the right word. But I walked away with something more valuable. Clarity. And once you have that, you don't go back. If there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's that betrayal doesn't begin at the moment you discover it. It begins much earlier, in the moments you choose to ignore, in the details you explain away, in the patterns you refuse to analyze because the conclusion would be inconvenient. I used to think trust meant giving someone the benefit of the doubt. Now I understand that definition is incomplete. Trust is not the absence of doubt. It's the presence of consistency. Back then, I believed Angela because I wanted the system to remain stable, not because the data supported it. That's the first mistake most men make. We prioritize emotional equilibrium over factual accuracy. We tell ourselves things like, she's just tired. Work has been stressful. I'm overthinking this. Those statements sound reasonable. They sound mature. But in reality, they are often just delays. Delays in confronting what is already unfolding. The truth is, intuition is not emotional. It's analytical. It's your brain processing inconsistencies faster than your conscious mind is willing to accept. When something feels off, it usually is. Not always catastrophic, but rarely meaningless. Looking back, the signs were not hidden. They were subtle. And subtlety is more dangerous than obvious deception, because it gives you room to rationalize. Angela didn't suddenly become a different person. She shifted gradually, adjusted her behavior just enough to avoid triggering a direct reaction. That's how double lives are maintained. Not through bold lies, but through controlled deviations. Another lesson is about control. Most people think control means dominance. It doesn't. Control means positioning. When I found out, I had two options: react emotionally or respond strategically. If I had confronted her immediately, I would have lost leverage. She would have denied, deleted evidence, reframed the narrative, possibly even positioned herself as the victim. That's how these situations often play out. Not because one side is smarter, but because one side is more prepared. So I chose preparation. I documented everything. I verified every assumption. I removed uncertainty from the equation. That's control. Not raising your voice, not demanding answers, but making sure that when the moment comes, there is nothing left to argue. Another point most people overlook is this: closure is overrated. People think they need explanations to move on. They don't. Explanations are often just edited versions of the truth, designed to reduce accountability. Angela wanted to explain, but I already had the facts, and facts don't require interpretation. They stand on their own. So I didn't ask why, because why doesn't change what, and what is the only thing that matters when you're making decisions. There's also a misconception about anger. People expect rage in situations like this: explosions, confrontations, emotional collapse. But anger is inefficient. It clouds judgment. It accelerates mistakes. What I felt instead was clarity, a kind of detachment. Not because I didn't care, but because the situation no longer required emotion. It required action, and action benefits from precision. That doesn't mean it was easy. It means it was necessary. Another lesson is about self-respect. Not in the superficial sense, not in the form of ego, but in standards. What you tolerate defines your environment. If you ignore inconsistencies, you invite more of them. If you accept dishonesty, you normalize it. At some point, you have to decide what your baseline is. For me, it became simple. If words and actions don't align, the system is compromised. And compromised systems don't get patched. They get replaced. That applies to relationships, business, everything. There's also something to be said about consequences. Not revenge, consequences. I didn't set out to destroy Angela's life. I set out to protect mine. What happened to her afterward was a result of her own decisions interacting with reality. The exposure didn't create the problem. It revealed it. And once something is visible, it becomes subject to external systems, workplace policies, social dynamics, reputation structures. All of those systems operate independently of emotion. They respond to facts. That's why outcomes felt disproportionate. But they weren't. They were just delayed. Finally, there's the lesson about moving forward. A lot of people think the goal is to find someone better. That's not accurate. The goal is to build something better, with clearer parameters, stronger alignment, fewer assumptions. When I met Emily, what stood out wasn't excitement. It was consistency. No hidden layers, no contradictions, no need to investigate. That's what peace actually looks like. Not intensity, not constant validation, but stability you don't have to question. If I could reduce everything down to one principle, it would be this: pay attention to patterns, not words, not promises. Patterns. Because patterns don't lie. They repeat. They reveal. And if you're willing to look at them objectively, they will tell you exactly where you stand. The mistake is not being deceived. That can happen to anyone. The mistake is continuing to ignore reality once it becomes visible. I made that mistake once. I won't make it again. And that, more than anything else, is what this experience gave me. Not bitterness, not regret, but a framework, one that ensures I never have to guess again.